Very quickly today, we'll be talking about a very important topic, and it's also going to be a build up on Dr. F's class from last week, and is a very important part of our sales journey. I strongly believe that how we handle the leads that we have is very instrumental to the type of success we're going to get closing deals. And if we're going to be successful sales consultants, it's going to be very pertinent for us to, understand what leads are, understand how to engage them, and ultimately how to get the best out of them. But before I get into the thick of, the class, there are two things I would like us to keep top of mind, right? Now, the first thing is, look, as a sales consultant, it's very important to be outcome independent, which is the fact that you cannot assume that everybody is going to buy from you. And your job is ultimately to help people. And helping people doesn't always mean that they buy from you. It could mean that you tell them to buy something else, or you tell them to go and buy from your competitors, or you tell them to take another route, depending on the outcome that they expect from the investor. And second thing is this. Now, here most people complain about the quality of leads, right? So understand that your job as a sales consultant is to turn a no into a yes. Meaning that the difficulty, the complications, the uncertainty that you're facing with a potential lead is actually what your job is. So your job is actually rooted in the fact that you can turn somebody's no into a yes. So anytime you are faced with a roadblock, you are faced with some sort of friction, you're faced with uncertainty, you're faced with somebody that is just constantly on the fence, understand that it is your job to now turn that situation around. If every single customer, every single lead was hand out money in their hand saying that, look, I want to buy, it means that you'll be out of a job. There will be no need for you. So understand that friction, that complication, that uncertainty that you're facing with a potential lead or a prospect is actually what your job is. Your job is, to, in the long term or in the short term, convert that uncertainty or doubt into a yes. So when you're dealing with clients or prospects, understand that, look, it's not every time that they'll just be, ready to buy. Your job is to groom them over a period of time and to get the desired result. Now, prospect qualification and lead generation. It will make a lot of sense if we even started to define what a lead is, because I think that most people miscommunicate, or they can't even tell the difference between a lead and a prospect. So, what is a lead? Right? So, a lead is somebody who has shown interest in your product or your service. So, anytime you run an ad, anytime you um, talk to somebody about a project and they respond positively, anytime you get a referral, that person is a lead. And there's something called like a sales journey. So usually there's like a 4-5 step process, before people actually make a buying decision. And from the point of contact, which is a lead, to the end and most advanced lead type, which is a customer. So there's actually a process from somebody being a lead and somebody being a customer. In between that, there's a lead, there's a prospect, there's a qualified prospect, there's an opportunity, and then there's a customer. So it's usually like a 5-step stage, right? So somebody comes in as a lead. Now, as I defined earlier, a lead is somebody who has shown interest in your product or a service. Now, the second stage is a prospect. So a prospect is a lead who has a realistic potential to become a customer. So you can see that there's a slight difference between what a lead is and what a prospect is. It means that not every lead is a prospect. For example, if you run an ad and somebody raises their hand and says, look, I'm interested in this product, that person is a lead. Now, while engaging with the client, if you now realize that, oh, they clicked on the ad because they assumed that you were selling something else, it means that that person is no longer a prospect. That person could have been a lead initially, but the second stage where they are showing more interest, or there's a high potential of them to do business with you, that person is not that. So a lead is somebody that has the potential. A prospect is somebody that you've already qualified after seeing that they are a lead, and they are also showing more interest in that. Now, there's also the third stage, which is an opportunity for a sale. So an opportunity is a qualified prospect who is actively considering the purchase. So as I said earlier, a lead is somebody who has the potential to buy. A prospect is somebody who has showed extra interest, and a qualified lead is somebody that after a series of engagement, the person is showing a very high interest to buy. So if you run an ad, so let me just give you a practical example, right? If you run an ad and somebody raises their hand that they're interested, that person is a lead. Now, the second stage is at every point of contact, if they are still showing positive interest, that person is a prospect. If they now say, look, I want to come for an inspection, that person is a qualified prospect. Now, the fourth stage is a customer, right? A customer is obviously, when somebody does business with you, they transact with you, right? The person has made a payment, a transfer for a product or a service. That person is a customer. So we can see very quickly that a lead, a prospect, a qualified prospect, and a customer is two different things. Now, most of us have a tendency to count our eggs before they hatch. And what that actually means is that you're talking to somebody, you're very, very excited, you're very giddy, they come for inspection, and just assume that the person is a prospect or the person is a customer. No, until somebody actually pays for a product or a service, they can fall into all these other categories, which is a lead, a prospect, a qualified prospect, or a customer. So the sales journey is usually like this. It's usually a four-step process. Now, bear in mind that it might not happen in this order. Somebody could go from lead to customer almost immediately, depending on the level of trust and rapport that you have with them. But usually, people go through this four-step process, which is they start off as a lead, they become a prospect, they become a qualified prospect before they now become an end game customer. Now, the next thing we're talking about today is the misconception people have about leads. The misconception people have about leads. And I see this most obvious in a situation where somebody like runs ads. So when people run ads, ultimately they just assume that the people that see the ads are people that are going to be ready to buy. Now, it's one of two things. It's possible that those people are ready to buy, but it's also possible that those people need to be groomed over a period of time before they can make a purchase, right? So the first thing I want to say is that the first misconception is that every lead has to buy, right? Every lead has to buy. Now, a lead has shown interest and not commitment, right? So if somebody raises their hand, it is a sign of interest, not a sign of commitment. So every single time you get a lead, it will be a disservice on your part, and it will also help you manage your expectations. If you understand that, look, this person merely showed interest, it doesn't mean that they are committed. So you cannot mix interest up with commitment. So people go for inspection with leads and not prospects, and they get worried or concerned that they don't buy. Now, if you have a filtering system, you'd realize that, look, somebody can be a lead, but they might not be a prospect. So not every lead is going to buy. Now, the second thing is all leads look the same, right? All leads look the same. Now, the truth is that the difference between a lead and a prospect can only be uncovered with time. So when you talk about things like their budget, their need, their intent, and their timeline, that's when you'll be able to filter out between a lead and a prospect. So most of them look the same. At the initial point, the person that's going to buy a property of 100 million naira and the person that's going to just waste your time for 6 months at a stretch, they usually look alike. So it's with the passage of time that you'll be able to differentiate between a lead, right, and a prospect. Now, the third thing is that the more leads I have, the more I will sell, right? The more leads I have, the more I will sell. That's also false, because look, more leads does not really always equate to more sales, because you now have to consider the quality of leads that you're engaging with on a daily basis, right? And you also have to understand that you need to have better leads, better qualification, to have better conversion. So if you have a lot of leads, like I see people, they do a lot of advertising, they run a lot of ads, but it's not about the quantity of leads. It's usually about the quality of leads, right? So if the leads are not good, if they are not quality, no matter how much of them you have, you just be having endless conversations in a loop, right? So you need to understand that it's not just about the quantity of leads, it's also about, the quality of leads. Now, the fourth thing is that a lead asking for price is a serious buyer, right? A lead asking for price is a serious buyer. Now, that's also very untrue. So if somebody comes into your DM and they say, look, I'm interested in this product or this service, how much is it? When can I pay? When can I show up? It doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to buy, because price inquiry shows interest and buying behavior shows intent, right? So it's all, as I said earlier, it's only over a period of time that you're going to be able to know for sure if somebody is actually serious, about buying the product or not. Now, the last but not the least is that if a lead says no, they are useless, right? If a lead says no, they are useless. Now, for those of us just joining the call, I made reference to the fact that, look, your job as a salesperson is to convert uncertainty into certainty, right? So that complication, that friction, that reluctance to go forward that you're feeling with your client, that is actually your job. Your job is to convert a no into a yes, right? So anytime you're talking with somebody and they say no, you should be very excited because it gives you an opportunity to actually prove yourself as a good salesman. What is the evidence that you're good at what you do if you cannot convert a negative into a positive? So 80, 90, 95% of your job is finding a hopeless situation and turning it into a positive one, right? And that usually happens over time. So if a lead says no, it does not automatically mean that they are useless. It could just mean that they need more time, they need more information, they need to build more trust, right? And all that. So now the next thing we're talking about today is lead generation, right? Lead generation. Please write this down if you can. Lead generation, right? Now, lead generation is the process of attracting and capturing potential clients. I'll go over it again, right? Lead generation is the process of attracting and capturing potential clients. Now, I'll be talking about four different types of lead generation processes. Now, the first one is content, right? Content. Now, content is the cheapest way to put yourself out there at little to no cost. Now, there's nobody's mic is on. Dr. Oyindamola, please. Mr. Ralph, thank you very much. Yes, so content is the cheapest way to put yourself out there, right? So most people are thinking of growing a business, are thinking of putting themselves out there, are thinking of having greater reach on social media. And the fortunate thing about creating content is that the more you create it, the more the algorithm pushes your product. So every single day you should have like a content target. How many contents am I putting out this week? Most of us spend a lot of time doing the least productive things. Now, if you're going to be serious about getting good success with your business, your product, or your service, it is very, very important that you put the right type of content out there. So Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp. Now, most of these things you can do for practically free with your cell phone, and internet, and probably like a tripod stand at most. You don't even need like a fancy setup, right? You can do it in the comfort of your home. Content actually is one of the fastest and most efficient way of lead generation, because especially if your face is out there. So what happens is that the more content you make, the more people see your face, the more they resonate with you, the more you build trust and all that. So creating content, of course, is one major way to lead generate, to get new people to do business with you. Now the second thing is paid advertising, right? Paid advertising. Now anytime I talk to my team members, right, in the office, I tell them that, look, it is very important that you invest in your craft, right? It is very important that you invest in your craft. Now, think about it like this. With the help of social media, one person can reach 10,000 people in a day. But if you wanted to physically do that, it would be practically impossible. Now, so if you could pay for the algorithm or social media to push your product or your services, it makes a lot of sense, because by yourself, you cannot reach out to 5,000, 10,000 people a day. It is physically impossible. So if you could pay a little amount, 5,000 naira, 10,000 naira spend a day, will go a long way for 6 or 7 days, right? You get across to about 40 or 50 leads. It is a good use of your resources. If one of those people make a sale, you've made your money back. It's a gamble, but it's a positive gamble, right? So paid advertising, things like Meta ads, Google ads, sponsored content, right? It also comes under the umbrella of influencers, so that you can pay it, to help you promote or market your product. These are very effective methods of lead generation. Now, the third thing is referrals, right? Referrals. I think Dr. Efeolu also covered this topic a couple of weeks back, right? And he was talking about the fact that You could leverage on your existing customers to get new customers. So referrals could also come from clients, right? If you do a good job, as I always say, if you do a good job, there's a very high probability or possibility that you can ask for a referral. In fact, you know that you've done a really good job when you don't even ask for the referral and the referral comes in, as a result of the job that you've already done. So I've actually sold to some people before. In fact, one of the most interesting things that's ever happened to me as a sales consultant over the last couple of years is the time I bought from a lady in the UK, and according to her, the service and the attention to detail was so good that she referred 3 of her friends to me. Now, I didn't even know that she referred me until the third person came and sent me a screenshot of the experience this lady actually had with me, right? And according to her, it was so good that she had to tell her that, I'm talking to an agent in Lagos, and I'm talking to an agent in Lagos, and he paid so much attention to me, and he just seemed like he really cared about me and the transaction. And if you want to buy land in Lagos, call this guy, hit him up, he'll do a good job for you, right? So referrals. Now, the last thing is direct prospecting. All right, direct prospecting. Now, direct prospecting is when you are actually the primary point of contact with the potential clients. So when you call people on the phone, you have their phone numbers, or you reach out to them on WhatsApp, right? Or you go for a networking event where you meet people, or there's like a database activation. You understand? That is another way to, lead generate. So as I said earlier, for those of us just getting on the call, I was talking about the ways that we can actually lead generate. And I was talking about the first thing, which is content. I said it was the cheapest and easiest way to put yourself out there on a daily basis, with little or no cost. Now, the second thing is paid advertising. I spoke about meta ads, Google ads, and then sponsored content. I also talked about referrals, how you could get referrals from your clients, from agents, from partners, and networks that you currently have. I also talked about direct prospecting, which is the most recent thing I talked about, where I said, look, if you go for a networking event and you meet potential clients, or you're making phone calls, or you're talking to them on WhatsApp, that is direct prospecting. Now, we'll also be moving to the next subtopic of the day, which is prospect qualification. Prospect qualification. Prospect qualification. How do you qualify a prospect? Now, you need to understand that as a sales consultant, you don't have unlimited time. And what that means in essence is that you need to figure out, a system or a filtration way to separate the wheat from the chaff. Most of us, myself inclusive, we find ourselves stuck in a loop with clients that are never going to buy. So they converse, they are talking about how many grains of sand are on the property. They're talking about how it's too far from where they stay. They're talking about how the energy they're getting from the property is not good. There's some people that their objective is just to waste your time, to compare prices, to just, make you look busy, without actually giving you any value for your time. So you need to learn how to properly prospect, qualify the prospect. Now, the first thing is need, right? You can qualify based on need. Why do they want to buy? Right? Why do they want to buy? Why do they want to buy? You could ask questions like, what are you looking to achieve? Right? So if somebody is just there for window shopping and you ask them that, look, what are you willing to achieve by this investment? Usually they can't really give a coherent answer. They can try to make one up, but usually you can just tell. So you can qualify based on need. And the second thing is that, is this for personal use or investment, right? So from that, you can actually know. Are you just looking around? Is this for a personal use? Is it for a long-term development? You could also ask, what is the most important thing to you? Right? What is the most important thing to you? Now, these questions actually help you uncover need, right? To uncover why this person wants to go ahead, with this investment. Now, the second thing is budget. Budget, right? Can they afford it? Can they afford it? Because most of us like to um, ask about how we can overcome objections. The objection of price, the objection of third party, which is when somebody wants to talk to their husband or wife about the investment. But the reality of things is this: if somebody doesn't have the money to buy, except you want to loan them the money, then that person is not your client. So you need to also filter people out based on budget. Now, what budget have you allocated for this investment? How much do you have to make right now? outside of all the objections of pricing, of title, if I can provide the documents, you understand, like how much do you have set aside for this investment? You could also ask that what price range are you looking at, right? What price range are you looking at? How much are you willing to spend, right, on this investment? Now, the third thing is what needs the third is outright payment or a payment plan, right? So if somebody is not very sure about how to move forward, you could qualify them based on the price. Do you want to pay outrightly, or would you like a payment plan? Now, the third thing is timeline, right? Timeline is practically when are they likely to buy, right? When are they likely to buy? You could ask them that when are you looking to secure the property, right? You could ask them that are you buying now or you're still researching. You could also ask that what needs to happen before you are ready. You understand? So as I said a couple of weeks back, when I had the opportunity to share some of my ideas about, prospecting, handling objections and all that, I said, look, your questions are actually like a filtering process. So you're not asking questions just to ask questions or to look cool or to look knowledgeable. The objective of you asking questions is to be able to uncover the client's real intentions. Now, most times these things, they look very common or impractical when it's being shared in a class. But trust me, when you execute these things and you're talking to somebody face to face, if you ask them some of these questions, by their body language and their responses, you know the people that are serious and the people that are not. So when you ask somebody a question, there's just an intuition you have inside of you as to whether this person is actually a serious person or not. So the fourth thing is authority, right? You can actually filter based on authority. So most times we find ourselves stuck or stranded because we are not dealing with the final decision makers. So if you are dealing with, for example, hypothetical situation, you are dealing with a prospect that is a man, and him and his wife, they don't make decisions outside of each other, right? So what happens is that you'll be dealing with a third person objection, because no matter how convincing the property is, no matter how convincing the project is, no matter how convincing the service is, if the person doesn't liaise or converse with his wife, he's not going to go ahead. So sometimes we hit a roadblock because we're not dealing with the final decision maker. So you can qualify people based on authority, right? Will you be making decision by yourself, right? Is anyone else involved? Who else needs to approve the purchase, right? So we need to ask some of these questions, not because, as I said earlier, not because we want to sound knowledgeable. And I think that salespeople, we fall into that trap, myself inclusive, where we like to just talk because we want the client to think that, oh, we are knowledgeable about the project. Yes, there's product knowledge and there's a place for you to exhibit your intelligence. But at the same time, you need to know when to talk and when to listen. And you also need to know the quality of questions to ask. So your questions, as I said earlier, is you're like a secret agent trying to figure things out. So those questions give you cues, they give you hints into which direction you should go in. So ask about the authority. Who is the final decision maker? Do you want to talk to your wife outside of all these other objections that you clearly have? If you take care of the objection of distance, the objection of title documents, the objection of time frame of completion of the project, is this something that you could pull out your bank app now and pay for this property? Can you make that decision alone without consulting somebody else, right? That is the way that you can find out, qualify somebody based on authority. Now, the fifth thing is motivation, right? The fifth thing is motivation. Why are they considering it now, right? Why are they considering it now? What makes you start looking for a property now? When they tell you all these things, it also gives you a cue. It gives you an idea, right, of why the person is buying, and it helps you to actually properly qualify them. Now, next thing I'm talking about today, because we're already getting very pressed for time, is lead categorization, right? Lead categorization. Now, intent is actually demonstrated through action, right? Intent is demonstrated through action. Now, I think I've spoken about this before, but just for the purpose of this class, I'll go over it again. Now, there are three types of clients that you're going to meet, right? And the first client is the hot client. Now, a hot client is somebody that is in the market to buy your product right now. So if somebody is, I don't know, sitting on 22 million naira, or I don't know, they just won the jackpot, on Sporty Bet last weekend, and they have 22 million naira that they are looking to invest in a housing project in Ibadan right now. That person is a hot prospect. So understand that a hot prospect is somebody that is in the market for your prospect right now. It's probably the type of prospect or leads that most of us are hoping that we get to engage with this week. So a hot prospect is somebody that is high intent, is a good fit, he has the ability to buy, and is the near term timeline, meaning that that person is ready to buy as quickly as this afternoon. Now, a warm prospect is somebody that has genuine interest, good potential, but not ready to buy yet. Now, there are two types. They're either somebody that is not ready to buy yet, or somebody that has the resources. They are liquid enough, right, to buy your project or your product or your service, right? So a one prospect is somebody that they are not really interested in the product, but if you did a good job as a sales consultant, you can convince them to invest a part of their resources with you. Now, a cold prospect is someone that has low intent, they have an unclear need, and they don't have any immediate timeline. So if you are talking to somebody, you run an ad, you are getting some household leads that they can barely even communicate with you, or you're talking to somebody that clicked your link by your lead, your Instagram link, for your ads by accident. That person is a cold prospect. So it means that they actually have little to no potential of buying, or they are not going to buy at all. Now, the last one is disqualified leads, right? Disqualified leads are people that they are a poor fit, right? They cannot afford it, they have the wrong requirements, or they have no realistic buying path, right? They are almost like a cold prospect. But I think with a cold prospect is that with a lot of time, effort, and energy, even though it can be very time and energy consuming, there's a possibility that they can buy. But with a disqualified prospect, the probability that they'll buy, or the percentage that they'll buy, is almost in the negative, right? It's almost in the negative. Now, another thing I'm talking about today is how do you reduce wasted effort? How do you reduce wasted effort, right? So, most of us have an approach to sales that might be wrong, right? So, most of us, we lead, after we have a lead, we pitch, we follow up, and usually leads to wasted time. So most of us actually have a system that is not really very effective, right? So most of us, if we have a lead, we pitch to them, we follow up, and more often than not, it leads to a waste of time, right? So what is the better approach? How do you now properly, go about it? How do you properly engage, with people? How do you properly ensure that you get the best of them, right? So a better way to do it is when you get a lead, the first thing to do is to qualify them, right? To qualify them. As I said earlier, I gave you some qualification tactics. How do you qualify a lead? By asking the right type of questions, by picking their brain, by seeing what their timeline is, by seeing what their budget is, by seeing what their interest is, by seeing what their motivation is. So the first thing you do after you get a lead is not to pitch, is to qualify them. Who am I even talking to? Should I be giving them 100% of my energy? These things are very, very important. Now, the second thing is categorize them. As I said earlier, not every lead is the same. Somebody can be a lead, somebody can be a prospect, somebody can be an opportunity, a qualified prospect, and somebody could be a potential customer. So the first thing is to do is to get a lead, right? And then second thing to do is to qualify them. The third thing to do is to categorize them. So am I very clear? Are you hearing me very audibly? Please, if you are, just drop an emoji so that I know for sure that I'm not. Thank you very much. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Mr. Josh. Thank you so much. All right, then. So let's just get straight to it. Now, the first thing to do is to get a lead, right? Second thing to do is to qualify them. So once you are done qualifying them, third thing to do is to categorize. As I said earlier, look, not every lead is the same. You have hot leads, you have warm leads, and you have cold leads. So after you categorize them, you then prioritize. So understand that the energy you are giving to, a hot lead is not the same energy you'll be giving to a cold lead. It's like somebody that wants to, move into an apartment today, right? They are looking for accommodation. They are homeless. They will give a priority to a completed project over a project that is off plan. Like, you understand exactly what that means. It means that based on people's priorities, they are going to pick and choose the investments that are best for them. So it means that your time is also an investment as a salesperson, right? And you need to understand that, look, you cannot be giving the same energy you are giving to your household leads that you are giving to people that are, hand in pocket with money full of it, waiting to buy from you. So you have to prioritize. And the third thing is four things to follow up. Now, following up is another topic that I could talk about for another 45 minutes. But since we're pressed for time, I'll just say a few things about following up. Right now, following up is complicated for most people because they don't know how to properly do it. As I always say to my team members, they say, look, following up is easier when you are following up with value. Have something important to say. And for example, let me give you a recent situation that happened to me. I had a very stubborn client that didn't want to make his installmental payments for Oli Modern Market. And of course, he was running out of time. He needed to make the payments and all that. So I was torn between two options. Should I say, look, please, can you make your deposit for XYZ property? You're already lagged back, in for about 2 months. You don't make the payment. But I said, if I did that, it would just seem like I'm disturbing him and I'll get little or no response from him. He doesn't have an emotional reaction, if you say something like that to somebody. But I thought about a better approach. I said, look, good afternoon, Mr. XYZ, right? I'm trying to hold down the unit facing the road for you. But if you don't make this deposit, I can't hold it down for you. So, it was like a help me help you situation where, look, I'm trying my best to ensure that you get the best situated property on this project. But if you don't make the installments, then we cannot make it happen. So following up is easier when you're following up with value. Tie your follow-up to the client's interest. If you just say, oh, good afternoon, I'm just following up because of your payment, you just get lost in the crowd. Like you don't strike a nerve with them. Your job is to ensure that when you're following up, you actually have something reasonable or meaningful to say. Otherwise, you just get lost in the crowd. Now, the last thing is to convert, right? So close them, as Dr. F said, let the client close themselves. At a point, you have to just keep quiet. When someone says, oh, they want to make a payment, send them the details, give them all the information, let them do the payment. Now, for the last topic of the day, we're going to be talking about, because we're pressed for time, and I also want to give an avenue of like 2-3 minutes just in case people have questions to ask. So there's a practical qualification technique, right? So the first thing is to discover, to understand, to qualify, and then to recommend, right? So understand that once you discover a client, you then have to understand them, qualify them before you now, recommend, a product or a service for them. So in other words, there's like a 5-step process, right? To just wrap this up, right? So the first thing is a lead. A lead is somebody that has shown interest, right? A lead is somebody that has shown interest. So this is like your final sales funnel. Now, a lead is somebody that has shown interest. Now, the second thing is a prospect. A prospect is somebody that has the potential to buy. Now, the third thing is a qualified prospect. It's somebody that meets the criteria. So if somebody has the resources to buy, they're in the market to buy the product or the project right now, and they are very, very ready. They are very, they're in the market to just make a deposit or a payment for that product. That person is a qualified prospect. Now, the fourth thing is an opportunity. Someone that is like, you guys are in an active buying process. They've asked for the brochure, they've asked for the FAQ, they've asked for the account number. You have a timeline of when they are going to make that payment. That person is a qualified prospect. And the last thing is a customer. As I said earlier, when somebody, makes a payment, then that person is a customer. Most of us don't really know how to properly manage our expectations because we assume that because someone has asked for account number or because somebody has engaged with our ad, they are going to buy. More often than not, that is not the case. Now, so for the people that just joined on the call that joined late, I want to just quickly go over the whole class in about 1 minute or less. Now, the first thing I talked about today was what a lead is, and I said a lead is somebody who has shown interest in your product or your service. Now, a lead is not somebody that's going to buy. A lead is just somebody that has engaged with you or your ad, met you in person and all that. They are different from a prospect, which is somebody that's actually shown higher interest, to do business with you, to buy your product or to buy your service. I also spoke about the misconception about leads. Not everybody is going to buy. Not all leads are the same. And because you have more leads does not mean that more people will buy from you. And a lead asking for price doesn't mean that they're a serious buyer. And I also said if a lead says no, it doesn't mean that they are useless. I also went ahead to say that look, your job as a salesperson is to convert a no into a yes. So that difficulty, that complication, that lack of interest that you are getting from a potential client, that is your job. That's why we hired you. You understand? We didn't hire you to ensure that people that say yes buy. Your job is to ensure that people that are saying no, people that are saying not yet, people that are saying maybe, you help them say yes. That is actually your job. I also spoke about lead generation processes. I spoke about 4 ways you could go about it. I spoke about content, which is the cheapest and the most common way to actually lead generate. So if you are looking to get more customers today, pull your phone out, on your ring light, put it on a tripod stand, and just keep creating content. Now, the second thing is paid advertising, Instagram ads, Facebook ads, Google ads, email marketing. I think the cheapest of all of them is like Meta and Facebook ads for as little as 5K a day. You can pick any time duration that is fine with you, and just get to it. Now, the third thing is referrals. You can get referrals from your clients, your agents. Referrals are easy to get on the condition that you did a good job. So most of us struggle with getting referrals from our clients or our prospects because we did not do a good job. Most of us are scared to say, recommend me to your friend now, because deep down we know that we did not deliver on the product or the service that we promised them before. I also went ahead to talk about prospect qualification, right? You can qualify people based on their need. Why do they need to buy? You can qualify people based on their budget. Can they afford it? You can qualify people based on their timeline. How soon are they willing to buy? You can qualify people based on their authority. Are you the final decision maker? So anytime you are talking to somebody and you say, look, I need to speak to my wife. I need to speak to my husband. I need to speak to my oga. It's somebody that sent me for inspection. You are dealing with a third-party inspection, right? So most times, okay, we have about 6 minutes left. So if you have a third-party objection, here's one way you can go about it. Somebody says, I want to speak to my husband. I want to speak to my wife, right? So there are 2 ways to go about it. The first way is the emotional way, right? Which is the fact that, look, you ask them about the problem that your product solves and ask them if their spouse is going to be upset that they got rid of the problem. So let me give you a hypothetical example, right? If you're selling Oli modern market to somebody, it's a product I love so much, so I can't stop talking about. So if you're selling OMM to somebody and they say they want to talk to their wife about it, you could ask them that, look, is your wife aware that you're struggling with customers for your business? Now, bear in mind that Oli Modern Market solves the customer problem. If they say yes, she's aware, do you think your wife will be upset that you're fixing the problem? No reasonable man is going to say no. So you find a way to emotionally make them make that decision. Like, look, your wife knows they are struggling with this. Do you think she'll be upset you're not fixing it? Now, the second way is the logical way. So you ask them that, look, you know your wife very well. What do you think she's going to object to about this property? She says it's too expensive because we already bought something recently. Handle that objection so that when they get home, they can handle the objection with the wife on your behalf. So I spoke about lead categorization, hot clients, cold clients, as well as warm clients, and disqualified clients as well, right? Now, this last thing I spoke about was practical qualification. What is their need? What is their budget? What is their timeline? What is their motivation? And I rounded up with the final sales funnel, which included a 5-step process, right, for most people. Now, the first thing is a lead, right? First point of engagement, that person is a lead. The second point of engagement is a prospect, right? The third step is a qualified prospect. The fourth step is an opportunity. And the last step is a customer. So when somebody opens their bank app, opens their wallet, buys your product or a service, that person is a customer. And it helps to manage your expectations if you can tell the difference between a lead, a prospect, a qualified prospect, an opportunity, or a potential customer, right? So with that, we get to the end of the class. And very quickly, if you got value for your time, kindly send an emoji down